Hello, everyone, and welcome into Boilermaker Lounge Wednesday edition. We, since there were some FIBA games that went on Tuesday, we decided to move our first episode of the week to Wednesday, so we could talk about those games. I am Sam Sprunger, as always, joined by Grant Flora, and today we have our buddy Dustin Schutte from Sports Illustrated in to join us. Gentlemen, how are we today?
We're doing pretty good. Ready to talk some FIBA hoops to get us going. It's been fun to have some basketball to watch again and to have some real games. So looking forward to it.
Dustin, how are we?
I'm doing great. I'm in the same category as Grant. Like it's like we had college basketball and then the NBA and then a little bit of a break and now we're getting FIBA and then before you know it, we'll be back to like fall practices and that October exhibition against Kentucky will be here before we know it.
I'm excited. I really am. It's nice. I work all summer long, so I'm sitting here, working, and I've got the USA and who they play Cameroon today or yesterday. Watching them and Daniel Jacobson. He hasn't started since the first game, Dustin. But what have you seen from him in these games, these FIBA games that make you feel like maybe at the very least it's benefiting Purdue?
Yeah, so it's kind of hard to tell in these games, and I think a lot of people are going to watch, and I've made the comment maybe a little bit haphazardly on social media that like the guards don't seem to know how to play with a big. I think that was probably an unfair comment on my end because when you throw these guys together and they're only practicing for a couple weeks, I think it's hard to gel. So you can't really look at the box score and say, did Daniel Jacobson play well or did he not play well? So what I've been kind of paying attention to is where is he on the floor? And a lot of times what I've seen is, at least in the first two games, he got really good position on the offensive side. And then the guards are trying to get to the basket, get contact. His defenders are usually collapsing. He's pulling away from the basket. If Braden Smith's in that situation, he's going to dump it off to Daniel Jacobson or lob it up to him for an easy 2 points like every time.
Right.
So he could, if Braden Smith was his point guard in this team, he's probably averaging, I don't want to I think he's averaging 5 points. I think you could probably safely double that if he's got, if this is a team that like a Purdue team. So the other thing I think was hugely beneficial, and I don't know if you guys, how much you tuned into that game against Cameroon on Tuesday. He was getting bullied around. Like they could not keep him off the glass. So they were arm barring him. They were hooking and holding him. They were, at one point, they legitimately grabbed both of his arms and tackled him when he was trying to get to a rebound. Clearly he was frustrated, but to me, I'm like, good. He needs to go through that because when you look at the non-conference schedule and then having to go through the grind of a Big Ten season, to me, that's what he's going to have to, like, look at what Zach Edey had to deal with, right? Just scrapes and scratches and bruises all throughout his career at Purdue. And Daniel Jacobson's probably going to have a similar fate. So he's got to learn to play through that physicality because you're going to have games where it's probably never going to be as bad as what I saw today, but there's going to be games where you're not going to get the calls and you're going to get beat up and you just got to learn to play through it. So to me, that's the positive. And then I think the overlying or the big picture is this is a kid who did not play any competitive basketball outside of that first game last season. Just the fact to get into that rhythm. So if he's playing 10 to 15 minutes a game, just the fact that he's out there competing and kind of getting back into that shape and learning how to use those additional 30 to 35 pounds that he's put on since last season, I think that's hugely beneficial for when he gets back to Purdue and rejoins the team for summer and then fall practices.
And he's still out playing Merez Johnson. I don't know about you. But I've been hearing some stuff about Merez Johnson and Jacobson kind of battling for that center spot. And at least today, technically still outplayed him. So that was something I noticed as well. He's not even playing from a box score standpoint, like his best, most productive statistics, but he's still outplaying Merez, who's going to be at Michigan. So that's kind of fun.
Yeah. And one thing I am interested, I remember this last year when he was in FIBA U18 playing in that. And I think it's kind of been the same now. It's hard to tell because Cameroon is not like none of the teams the USA played have been very good, right? So it's hard to tell sometimes. But in this, like last year, it took him a game, I think, and then as it progressed, he got better. And it seems like once he gets into the flow, once he kind of gets into a rhythm, he's much better. Like, he's not a guy that goes out there and then automatically just gets 6 points off the bat. He almost has to find a rhythm, as Matt Painter likes to say, get a lather into the game.
Right.
So that's one thing that stood out to me, is he's a guy that has to kind of get into a rhythm. And even if you go back to that Texas A&M Corpus Christi game, a lot of the big plays he made were late in that game when Purdue needed him to make some big plays. So again, like, it's hard to judge really what he's doing, because the USA is so much better. And to me, it's a lot of, I'm going to get mine. And they just have so much talent that it almost doesn't matter. So it can be hard to judge, but I think that there are some positives. I do think there maybe is a little bit of hesitation on his end. And I think that any player coming off an injury, especially when he played in just one game last year, I think that there's a little bit of hesitation of how much he trusts his leg. But I think the more he keeps playing, the more confident he's going to get. And so that's why I think it's also hugely important for him to get experience in this, and maybe build that trust back in himself and in his body.
Well, and Grant and I even talked about that last week is, last year it seemed like maybe during some of those games he was more of a concentrated, not the go-to, but one of those pieces that helped, the team go. This year he's coming in as kind of just a satellite piece, to where he's not going to come in. He's not going to be expected to put up 15, 20 points. He's going in and giving some minutes and getting some decent minutes like he did against Cameroon yesterday, to where he played 16 or almost 16 minutes. But he's able to work in that new weight that he's getting used to. He's getting back into his basketball shape. And that, to me, is a huge benefit for him going into next basketball season for Purdue.
Yeah, I think anytime you are when you have such a massive body change, and the thing that's been really impressive to me is I think sometimes guys might slow down. I don't know. It's hard for me to remember how quick he was sprinting up and down the floor last season, because we just didn't see it.
Right.
But he's not the fastest guy, but he moves pretty quick. I don't think he's like somewhere between Zach Edey and Matt Harms. Like, I think Matt Harms was really fast and I'm not saying Zach Edey was slow, but I think that Jacobson is just like a step ahead of him. So if he can, I think that's the biggest thing. If he can get out and transition and start to run a little bit better, then he's going to be a real problem. Because you can imagine a 7'4" guy who's trailing Braden Smith or Omair Meyer, who can just, put down a dunk. Whew, that's going to be a problem.
You talked about all the stuff that Zach Edey went through. Jacobson's going to have to go through a similar form of that. Whenever I think of all the stuff that Zach Edey had to go through, it makes me remember the tip-off to the Wisconsin game in Madison, where the picture is the guy jumping against him has his one arm pulled all the way down. Like, he was fouled on the opening tip-off. It wasn't called.
That was I mean, he was like a piñata basically every game. It's just crazy.
Let's go to Omair Meyer. His Israel team's 3-0. They beat Switzerland in the first round. They got a forfeit against Jordan, and then they played the Dominican Republic yesterday in a really good game. Omair Meyer did a fantastic job. Like, you and I were texting back and forth about it against Switzerland. But you were telling me about something that somebody said about Mr. Omair Meyer.
Yeah. So, okay. Yeah. So he ended that first game with 24 points. I think it was 4 assists and 4 rebounds, if I remember correctly, 8 of 13. And we had text in that game, and I told you that somebody had told me, and I don't know why I just didn't say that who it was, but he was compared to somebody. So basically the story goes is I told Sam that, hey, somebody told me he's basically a taller version of Braden Smith. That someone was Trey Kaufman-Renn, who was told that by Purdue assistant coach and former player PJ Thompson. So, and Trey even made a joke about that. He's like, if that's true, I don't know how we're going to lose a game. Like, who's going to beat us if that's the case? And again, this is really tough for me because he looked really good in that first game against Switzerland. But Switzerland, and then they played the Dominican Republic. Again, those teams are not very good. And he did have some trouble with ball pressure today. Yep. And it makes me there was a lot of dribbling. I don't know if he didn't trust his teammates. I don't know if Certainly when he gets to Purdue and has better players around him, it's going to be a lot better. But in that very first game, Switzerland had no answer. He could create off the dribble. The very first shot he made in that game was like a jab step, turnaround, fadeaway, one-legged shot from the free throw line. And you're just like, oh, okay. And I made this comment on my podcast where there were some passes in that game where it looked like a Braden Smith pass. And I'm like, oh, if that's going to Trey Kaufman-Wren's catching that pass. Instead, in this game, it goes out of bounds.
Turnover.
So I think that there's going to be a lot of room for improvement. I think people who expect him to come in and immediately be like Braden Smith 2.0 or even 0.5, I think there's going to be some learning there because the competition especially that Purdue's going to play in the non-conference I think he's going to have a little bit of an eye-opener. But the nice thing is you have Braden Smith, Jakari Harris, CJ Cox to work along with. But so far, and even today, he was 4 of 15, or yesterday, 4 of 15 from the floor, and still ended up with 14 points, and I think was a plus 18 in the plus-minus category.
Yeah, I agree with what you said about Omer and his dribbling. I noticed especially one time where he was just dribbling so much, and just a guy just came over and ended up stealing the ball. And I think there were some other times where it kind of led to a turnover. Maybe it wasn't even his, but he dribbled around a bunch past it, shot clock violation or something like that. So yeah, I was listening to some people before the game on Tuesday just about his game against Switzerland, and they were thinking, oh, this guy is basically like we were talking about, another Braden Smith. And I think we saw against Dominican Republic some of his limitations. But I've heard some different people that know what they're talking about. Some people think he's going to be a bench guy coming off just being like a 6th or 7th man, something like that. And then some who think there's no way he doesn't start on this Purdue team. So I guess that's something I would like to discuss, is just where do we think he fits in? Do we think he works into that starting lineup at some point and becomes that second fiddle to Braden Smith? Or do we think he is just going to come off the bench again? Because if he plays like he did against Switzerland and is consistently that guy throughout the regular season for Purdue, I have a hard time seeing him not start.
I think you raise a good point. Here would be my one concern is, well, first of all, it would be the dribbling and the kind of not making a decision, I think, is one question I have. The other thing is, and I don't think they had to make this in the Switzerland game, but in this Dominican game against the Dominican Republic, I don't know if you guys noticed this, but they went offense-defense, and he had to be subbed out on defense. So his defensive ability may not quite be where it is. So that leads me to believe CJ Cox will be the starter in that situation because he can probably be a little bit more productive on both ends. Now, if Purdue's in a situation where they just want to go, or they feel like they need two extremely good ball, because as much as we kind of critique his ball, dribbling, he's a very good ball handler. That's probably his biggest strength. He just has a tendency to over dribble. So I could see situations where if there's a certain matchup that Painter likes Omair Meyer, he might get a few starts. But I think the fact that CJ's got another year a full year under his belt, let me say, and that he can probably impact on both ends of the court, I think Omar's going to come in and relieve Braden and then also get plenty of minutes at the 2 spot. So he could be a guy who comes off the bench but gets starter-like minutes would be my guess to that. Kind of like a Mason Gillis with Trey Kaufman-Wrenn a few years ago.
And excuse me, I kind of look at it as who's on his team. The fact that he's dribbling so much might have to do with the fact that I don't want to say he doesn't trust, but a trust factor of, are they going to catch this pass? Yeah. Or can I make this pass and expect them to catch and shoot? When you get to a roster like Purdue, he's going to have maybe a little bit more trust that I can make that pass and it's going to get caught and it's going to get either laid up or, shot. And so I think while I totally agree, he dribbles a lot, but is he going to be, or once he gets to West Lafayette, it may help him. He may be a little bit more above what we're seeing at FIBA. Yeah,
I think that's a fair statement. And I think there's The other thing I'll tell you guys too, and this is not just going to pertain to Omair Meyer, although I know that that's what we're talking about.
Yeah.
One of the things that stood out to me when I was at that open practice was Braden Smith and Fletcher Lawyer and CJ Cox, even to an extent, were in Antoine West's ear. Like when he was making mistakes, hey, this is where you need to be. So to that point, I think when Omair Meyer gets on campus, he's going to have that same tutelage that those guys are willing to give. Like you could tell the leadership. And I don't know, I wasn't at an open practice last year, so I don't know how it compares to what they were doing last year with guys like CJ Cox and Jakari Harris. But I can tell you that they know they need to win, and in order to be as good as they want to be, they're going to have to bring those guys up to speed. So I think along with the fact that he's going to be playing with better talent, if he gets into a pickle, just get the ball back into Braden Smith's hands, because he's going to make the right decision 95% of the time. And that might be lowballing it, right? So
quite possibly.
I think it's going to help. The other interesting aspect of Grant's question is if Daniel Jacobson is back to full strength and he looks as good as he does on the defensive end, I'm not saying you want a weaker defender out there, but if Omair Meyer gets beat, it maybe isn't as devastating as it was a year ago, because you do have that rim protection and you have somebody to clean up your mess. So it's like, I put out this tweet the other day, and I think Matt Painter is going to be saying, I only have 200 minutes an awful lot this season, because the trouble it's a good problem to have, don't get me wrong, but the trouble he's going to have trying to figure out these rotations and who's going to play where. But I do think that because of CJ Cox's shooting ability, and because he can defend the entire length of the court, and he's a pretty decent ball handler. He may not be as good as Omair Meyer, but he's not a significant drop-off. And for those reasons, that's why I still think that CJ is going to get the nod, at least early in the season.
Where's Jakari Harris coming in all of this?
That's the $1 million question. Like, I don't know if it's going to be a straight. So the one thing is, I think he's going to probably play the 2 and the 3 would be my guess. Okay. I would say it's going to be more. If you in a picture perfect world, I think it's going to be, you're going to have Fletch play like 30 minutes and Jakari play 10 at the 3. And then maybe Jakari can steal 4 or 5 minutes at the 2. Okay. He looked good in their practice, but at the same time, it's like, okay, who's he going to beat out for time here? Like what? Right. that's another guy that that's another guy that I'm seriously interested to see, because he's just as good as those other guys. But he's the one that I think, if there's a guy that sees a reduction in minutes this year, he might be the guy. Or
which blows my mind, because he's so athletic and so good.
Yes, and let me point this out too. I'm going to throw out another possibility. Maybe Jakari plays a lot of minutes, and maybe we're talking about this, like, where does Omair Meyer fit in, right? Because we haven't seen him against college level competition yet. If there's a situation where Omair Meyer is only playing like 8 to 10 minutes a game, that means that CJ and Jakari have taken that next step, and they're so much better. So, like, there's a lot of possibilities that's only beneficial for Purdue.
There's so many caveats here.
Yeah, right?
The problem is, it's like, at what point do some of these guys start to get unhappy with their roles? Because you talk about, CJ or Jakari especially being sophomores and still, barely cracking double-digit minutes in a game. And, it's not even, they look as far back as Antoine West and Jack Benter. And you're bringing in good guys in the future. I mean, Luke Ertl is playing phenomenally right now to end his junior year. So I would be worried as we kind of get to the end of the season of what transfer portal stuff looks like. But we're obviously a long way away from that.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Does Matt Painter have conversations with these guys saying, look at what's leaving after this season, though, at the same time?
That was going to be my comment, was, do these guys, knowing that they have a legitimate chance to win a national championship this season, do they see the light at the end of the tunnel and say, you know what, I may only get 8 to 10 minutes this year, but we're not going to have at least five guys on this roster next season. And their recruiting class, while they're offering a lot of guys in that 26 and 27 class, they only have one commit right now, and that's, as you mentioned, Luke Ertl. Mm-hmm. So there's going to be, in my opinion, there's going to be a lot of opportunity in that I got to get my year right, in that 26-27 season, right? So I think that that's a real possibility. I think that there is a situation where Matt Painter's talking to these guys like, hey, I know this sucks right now, but you can play this year. We can win a national championship, and then look at what we have to build on for next year. Look at how you can carve out your role for next season. He's a pretty honest guy. Like, I think that that's probably a legitimate thing that he's having conversations with those guys about.
Yeah, don't miss the forest for the trees.
Yeah,
right.
Don't just make sure you're seeing what's beyond it.
And even if Luke Ertl is the only one that comes in the backcourt this coming season, if everybody comes back, you still have basically 6 guys that can play spots 1 through 3 with Omer and Jakari, CJ, Benter, West, and then you throw in Ertl. There's 6 really quality guards right there. So, they're going to be in pretty good position in that backcourt, even once you lose Braden and Fletch, which is pretty amazing.
I was talking to Grant last week about the fact that it seems like now, and don't get me wrong, I'm not counting my chickens before they hatched, but this year is expected to be an absolute great year from Purdue. They're going to lose a huge part of their team, like the heart of it right now. But at the same time, what they have coming up under them just makes me feel it's a reload, not a rebuild, with that big of a loss after this year.
Wouldn't you say? Now, I don't know, but because we don't, with the transfer portal and the way you can kind of rebuild or add pieces, we don't know. But it almost feels like the drop off would be similar to what after Purdue's national run to the national championship game, and then last year going 12-24 in the Sweet 16. Who doesn't sign up for that after you lose?
Yeah.
Like that roster is a Sweet 16 roster as it stands now, in my opinion. Right. And I'm sure they're going to add maybe another recruit or two, and I'm sure they'll add a piece or two out of the transfer portal, depending on what happens. But if you keep that core group, like Antoine West is going to be a baller. I'm just saying that right now. I don't know if he's going to be an NBA player, but he's going to light it up. CJ Cox, Jakari Harris, I think you should look at this and be like, worst case scenario, we're going to be a top 5 team in the Big Ten, even after these guys leave. And the other thing is, and I think we're going to talk about this later, is they are starting to get to the point now on the recruiting trail where they have 4- and 5-star kids who are saying, this is a top program. And I don't know if that's ever happened before. Maybe it hasn't. I just missed it. I haven't covered Purdue specifically until the last 2 years. But as much as even, my bias was always to kind of keep an extra eye on Purdue during those times when I was covering the Big Ten as a whole. But I don't ever remember 4- or 5-star kids just coming out and blatantly being like, this is one of the top programs. And now that the fact that they're starting to realize it, now Matt Painter has a lot more options than maybe he previously had.
Well, and Grant and I even talked about that too. The fact that that it seems like to me that he always has wanted 4 and 5 stars. I mean, don't get me wrong. He always at least keeps, tries to get a hold of them, but they never put them, Purdue in their top choices. And now they're showing that longevity and that culture that works now, that some of these better players are like, hey, maybe I can get in on some of this and learn this, maybe stick around for a couple of years, and then boom, it just, the 5 stars are like you said, are starting to notice and put them on their list.
Yeah, I think that that's hugely important. And I don't think, as Matt Painter and Purdue have proven in the past, you don't have to have those 4- and 5-star kids to win at a high level. You don't have to have them to get to the national championship. You don't have to have them to win the Big Ten. But if you can get them and they fit your culture and they fit your style, it certainly makes your life a lot easier. Yeah. And so, it's come to the point where I don't think – I'm going to use this example, and it's the best I have, because in 2015, Michigan State on the football side won the Big Ten title, and they got blown out by Alabama. And then Mark D'Antonio all of a sudden was like, we got to get better recruits. They started star chasing. If Matt Painter offers a 4 or 5-star kid, with 99.999% confidence, that kid is going to fit into Purdue's system. He's not just going to chase guys because they have star power, because they're suddenly interested in Purdue. Yep. When he recruited Luke Ertl was like 155 ranked and a 3-star kid. And I think he was still top 10 in Indiana, but he was lower towards the bottom 10 than he was the top. And now he's a top 50 prospect. So it's not going to be Matt Painter all of a sudden chasing these guys and, you got a culture problem because he started chasing 4 or 5 star guys. No, he'll still take the Braden Smiths and the Zach Edey's if they're under recruited. But if you can get a top 5 level player, it makes your life easier.
He's proved that he can take a low star recruit and turn him into. If Braden, I just listened or heard this and remembered me saying it to Grant, is Braden Smith now is a 5-star recruit if he's a freshman. And those are the kids that are now starting to be interested in Purdue. That's not saying that Matt Painter's going to jump at every single one that says, hey, I'd like to go to Purdue. You've got to fit the culture yet.
Right. And the other part of this that I don't think Matt Painter gets enough credit for, because it's been somewhat of a recent trend, but look at the guys he's put in the NBA. Jaden Ivey was a lottery pick. Zach Edey, lottery pick. Carson Edwards goes off for 42 in the NCAA tournament. Purdue is suddenly becoming they're national. They're being talked about nationally. And again, outside of everyone, it was always Purdue. Oh, they'll bring their blue collar. They'll bring their lunch pail and roll up their sleeves. And it was almost kind of I almost want to say backhanded compliment, because it was well, these kids aren't very good. They don't belong in the same court as Indiana and Michigan State, but darn it, they're going to fight real hard and they're going to win a few games and they'll get to the NCAA tournament. But now it's Purdue's in this golden spotlight where it's no, they are one of the top 5 to 10 programs in the country right now.
Mm-hmm.
Matt Painter's eye for talent. I mean, people talk about it all the time, just with Zach Edey, Braden Smith. But it's crazy that these guys are starting to develop before they even get to Purdue. I mean, Luke Ertl has jumped up, 80 spots or whatever. He's not even at Purdue yet. He's still got another year. To me, that's just crazy. That every time Painter finds somebody, you got CJ Cox. Feels like every year. It just shows how great of a coach that he is, and how great his eye is, and it shows why Purdue is in this golden era now and golden spotlight, like you were talking about, is because they've got a coaching staff that is just so knowledgeable and so good at developing these guys to play good college basketball. I think that's something a lot of these top programs don't have, is they can get these 5-star recruits to come in, but these guys play like NBA players. Purdue turns guys into good college basketball players.
Can you talk a little bit about what your interaction has been with the coaching staff? There's not a lot of turnover in his coaching staff. There are a few that go and stuff, but for the most part, he's got his core. What does that core mean to him?
Yeah, I mean, I think it means a lot. Obviously, Brandon Brantley has been the most valuable asset to that coaching staff. And I think, to answer your question, now I think there's probably going to be a few guys that in the near future are going to get head coaching opportunities. I think PJ Thompson is going to be one of those guys. But to your point, people don't leave because Matt Painter gives them responsibility. They're not just sitting on the bench, making a suggestion here or there. He has PJ run his offense. Paul Lusk and Terry Johnson run the defense. Sasha runs the out of bounds plays. Each guy has a specific role as to where they feel inclusive into that group. And he's preparing them for their next job. So if they're going to get offered another job, it's got to be a really good one, because they don't want to give up working for one of the best coaches for one of the best programs in the country. And just to kind of speak to, and maybe this is like this everywhere, I don't know. I haven't been in a lot of facilities or talked to a lot of assistant coaches, but coming into practice, the first thing Sasha Stefanovic does is shake every media member's hand. Just looks you in the eye and says, hey, good to see you again. Good to see you again. Good to see you again. Glad you're here. Glad you're here. That means something. It makes you realize why Purdue is so good at recruiting. If he's doing that for media members who, sometimes we have awesome things to say. Sometimes it can be rough. We have tough things to say. We have to be critical, right? So if he's willing to do that, and PJ Thompson chatting it up with some of us on the sideline during practice, not during drills and stuff, but during a quick break, he might make a comment here or there. They're just very personable. They're very not but when they get in between those lines, they take their job very seriously. And this is when we need to teach you about basketball.
Well, and I think even Matt Painter is very similar too. When you're in a press conference and you're asking him the question, he's eyes right straight through you. He's paying. And then when he answers you, he makes eye contact with you when he gives you your answer.
Yes. Can I tell you a funny story about that?
Absolutely.
I don't know that this is true at all, So after they lost, I think it was after they lost to Michigan in the Big Ten tournament. It was either after they beat USC or lost to Michigan. I don't remember which one it was. But he came in and they sit up on like this podium, and we are down below. And I'm sitting right smack dab in the middle. And during his opening statement, from my angle, it looks like he's staring right at me. Like he's talking to me the entire time. And have you ever had that moment where like somebody's making eye contact with you and it feels awkward, so you're trying not to laugh? Or like, And so I'm just sitting there, like I can feel my lips like quivering and like trying not to crack a smile and just die laughing because he's staring right at me.
Right.
He probably was looking at like the camera or somebody else or something on the wall. But from my angle, it looked like it. I'm just sitting there like trying not to laugh and, make him laugh up on podium. And it was funny, but it was also like one of those uncomfortable, like, oh boy.
Oh yeah. You're like terrified. You're like, oh, I don't want to sidetrack him. Please don't. Please don't.
Exactly.
Oh, so let's quickly move on to just some of the recruits. We talked about them last week, Dustin. A few of the recruits for 26, 27, and then Eric Dampier Jr. is, I believe, a 28 kid. I believe there's a Williams kid from Phoenix. I think he's a 27, 28 kid as well. He's a 4-star. Can you talk about some of those guys that he's offered here recently? The kid from Italy too, Luigi. I forget how to pronounce his last name. But talk about some of them and what your thoughts are on some of those guys.
Luigi, I think Saigo, maybe. I don't know if that's correct or not. I might just be giving him a last name. So I'll admit it has been a while since I've kind of looked at their film and talked about them. So I'll start with, there have been two guys that really stood out to me, and I believe they're both 2026 prospects. I know. Okay, so I'm going to start with one guy. I know he is Quinn Costello's a 6'10", and I think I believe he's from the New England area. I want to say he's from around where CJ's from. Could be wrong on that, but 6'10". This was a kid who, when I watched him and watched his highlights and his clips, I was like, that's a Purdue guy. He's 6'10". He was a spot up shooter, kind of looked like Cam Heidi type of jump shot, but at 6'10". I think he's kind of like the guy that everybody thinks Raleigh Burgess can be. Wow. He's aggressive on the glass. He's really quick in transition, can go up and throw down lobs. I was really impressed with, I just saw that guy and I'm like, if he's not at Purdue, that's a I don't want to say a miss, but that would be a negative for Purdue because the way he plays, he seems to fit. Now he could use some work on the defensive end, but everything about his offensive game, he would stretch the floor tremendously. He could probably play both the 4 and the 5, although I think he'd be undersized at that 5 spot. The other one that they offered in that class was Arifan Diane is how I'm going to pretend to pronounce
that is how it's pronounced. Yes.
He's 7'1" in the 2026 class. I think he's a top 20 prospect.
Top 25.
Top 25. Okay.
Yep.
Raw, very raw. Yes. And that was the first takeaway. I think he's rated so highly because of probably his strength, his size, and his ability to just dominate the glass. But when I watched this tape, he wasn't taking on anybody that even remotely compared to him in size. Right. So that's a problem. So this to me would be a work in progress for Purdue if he was to commit. But Zach Edey was a work in progress. Isaac Haas was a work in progress. Daniel Jacobson is a little bit of a work in progress. So, but I think his comparison to me would be Zach Edey or Isaac Haas, just because he's not like Daniel Jacobson and Matt Harms are kind of that tall, slender type. Whereas, and AJ Hammonds is kind of a mix between the two. Right. So I think just the size, the strength, the frame, he reminds me of Zach Edey, Isaac Haas. So he would probably come in, and I don't think he would be like a 2010 type of guy immediately. He's probably a guy that's going to be like a Zach Edey. He may come in off the bench, and you're like, why the hell is a top 25 recruit coming in off the bench? But that was just the first thing I saw. I'm like,
work in progress.
Yeah, this kid has some raw talent. But he's going to have to be worked a little bit before he's ready for Big Ten basketball. The other one that really stood out to me was I can't bring up the story, so I'm going to probably forget some of this stuff. But Reese Alston, who's the son of Rafer Alston, former NBA player. I think he was a top 40 prospect, if I remember correctly. And the one thing I noted about him was I hate to make these comparisons because then people automatically think he's going to be the next Braden Smith, but a guy who, in terms of what Purdue wants to do, can go in, swoop in, grab a rebound, and then push the ball and get out in transition, and not afraid to score, not afraid of contact, can finish through, knocks down some threes. I don't think that was the greatest aspect of his game. I think he's more of a driver, if I can remember correctly. But the thing that stood out to me was he was a guy that could get out in transition and then, ditch time, whatever he needed to do. So those were the three guys that kind of stood out to me. I know Colbin Landrew, the 4-star kid in the 2026 class. I think he's from around Jakari's area. I think he's around Atlanta, maybe. And he just came on. This is the kid that I was kind of talking about. He said he considered Purdue one of the top programs. Now, doesn't mean he's going to commit,
right?
But that's a 4-star kid that has every skill imaginable in his bag. I would say he's probably a better version of Jacari in the sense of I think he's probably a more pure shooter and can probably do things a little bit better on the glass than Jacari. But another kid that's really skilled. He just came. Purdue's offered him. I think they offered him last year, but he just came off of a visit in late June. So it sounds like he's in their good graces, or vice versa, however you want to phrase that. So those are a couple. I'm sure there's some other ones that I missed there, but again, with FIBA and everything, it's probably been a week since I've done any recruiting updates, so I might be a little bit behind on that.
I know the 28 class. Eric Dampier Jr., the list I saw, he was number 2 on that list.
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
But at the same time, like you said, that doesn't mean they're coming just because they've been offered. They're going to get offered by a lot. I know Deani has UConn, IU, and I believe Xavier, I think, is one of them, and Purdue, and I think maybe even Cincinnati. I mean, there are some big programs going after all of these guys. Purdue's not going to be the perfect fit for everybody, but the fact that Matt Painter and company think that they're good enough to be offered tells me they're the culture guys that probably could fit very well in with the Boilermakers.
Yeah, absolutely. At this point, again, I'm sure there's probably a guy or two that they offer that they're like, maybe culturally we missed on this guy or mentality wise, but they continue to do, they've offered Dylan Betts, 7'2", the Luigi Siago guy that you mentioned is 7'3". So they continue to go down the path of wanting to get 7-footers into the program. They've also extended offers to a kid named Xavier Skipworth, Kevin Savage. Kevin Savage, I think, is 5'10", 5'11", but he's a really, really good passer. Xavier Skipworth is a 6'4", 6'5" guard. So it's always funny to me. It's a lot of coaches have their prototypical guys that they want. And Matt Painter's whatever, if you can play, I don't care if you're 5'10" or 6'6" and you're playing point guard. I just want guys who can play. So that was the interesting thing to me about the guards. But when it comes to the center position, he always is going to want somebody 7 foot plus on his roster if he can get them.
I feel like a lot of the stuff you were talking about, what these players can do, a lot of it are things that Purdue doesn't necessarily have a lot of right now. Some of the raw talent and stuff you were talking about, the transition bigs and whatnot. So that's exciting to me, just to see Purdue kind of venture into some of these other areas where they haven't been the strongest in recent years. And I think there are areas that if Purdue had been stronger, I think they might have been able to fare better against a team like UConn in the championship game, or even Houston last year. So that, I think, is a pretty good indicator of where this program is moving, and how we've already kind of talked about the talent level that they're being able to recruit now, but also some of the different styles of players that they can bring in. I think if they can mesh that with what they already have, they'll have a really nice balance of that talent and that athleticism, and then the skill and the development as well. So that's pretty exciting to see in these future classes.
And I would love to ask, and maybe this is a dumb question, maybe somebody's already answered it, but I would love to ask Matt Painter and their coaching staff, is there a specific 2 or 3 qualities that you look for in every single player? And I'm not just talking about they've got to have the right mindset. We know they have to fit in culturally to get an offer from Purdue, but do they have to be able to move in transition? What are you looking for specifically and is it standard across all positions? Is it, based on per position? To me, the one thing that has been interesting to me about this too, and I said recruit guys based on Doesn't matter if their size, as long as they can play at the guard positions. But the other thing that I think Matt Painter has surrounded himself with really well the last couple of years is he also likes those stretch fours. Yeah. Like I think he thinks Riley Burgess can be that. Mason Gillis was that. Camden Heide was that. And so that's why that Quinn Costello kid, I don't put in crystal balls or anything, but he is such a perfect fit for Purdue. When I watch his style, I'm like, man, that guy can. And to me, now again, this is AAU high school, so how do you really know? He also, to an extent, looked like a kid that's what they wanted Cam Heide to be, because there were times when he would catch the ball and then just, I've got a quick open path here. I can beat the defender off the dribble and get to the basket and lay it in. And so that's like a Purdue, if they had a guy at the 4 who could put the ball on the deck and get to the basket, in addition to being a 38 to 40% three-point shooter. Yeah. Are you kidding me? That's what they wanted Camden Heide to be. And to his credit, Camden Heide was a lot of things, but that was the one thing he was not really.
Yeah, it's all of the possibilities. And here's a thing that I just actually thought about is anymore with the way that college basketball is constructed now, having somebody around for more than 2 years is probably just absolutely amazing. If you've got them in your program for longer than 2 years, whether they go to the NBA or they transfer out because they're unhappy for whatever reason. And that's what I keep thinking is, okay, now we're coming into this season. We know at the end of this season there's going to be a lot of open spaces. Does that help? And I keep thinking that I would like to think that the players that Matt Painter has on his roster right now, they're going to see that. But at the same time, there are chances that there are going to be people going because there are recruits coming in that may supersede you as a junior.
Yeah, that's always the risk you're going to have in these situations. And I think Matt Painter knows, and I don't know what a typical year looks like in terms of offers, but it feels like, and I know that they're going to have more scholarship opportunities, but it also feels like they've been a lot more active on the recruiting trail. And a lot of that is the fact that they're going to lose 5 guys. Right. So that's understandable, but
at the very least 5 guys.
Yeah. Yes, that's correct. So it's just been very interesting to me because it's so hard to forecast and project because, it was like 8 years ago, you knew who was going to be on your team the following year. You would know, I have to replace 3 guys. I have to replace 5 guys. Maybe you lose one every once in a while to transfer, but now it's just such a crazy game that who knows what's going to happen. And let me point this out too. I also think Purdue doesn't get enough credit. Matt Painter doesn't get enough credit for when he redshirts guys. And how important it is that a guy like Trey Kaufman-Renn was willing to take a redshirt season. Yeah. And I feel like that's going to be a trickle-down effect. If Jack Benner, if this season or next season, if he has a really good season, like Matt Painter can say, like, look, Trey Kaufman-Renn is, whether he plays in the NBA or not, he's a 2-time first-team All-Big Ten selection. He was a redshirt. Jack Benner, who's a starter on our team or plays 20 minutes, he redshirted his freshman year. So there's a lot of examples like that. And I think the fact that they've been able to establish that culture and the fact that those guys are kind of passing that down and there's kind of that respect, like maybe I'm not too good to take on a red shirt. And that's why it's going to be really interesting to me to see whether Antoine West and Raleigh Burgess take on red shirts this year. If Antoine West has 4 years of eligibility after this year, like that's, again, I just think he's the in the words of Michael Jordan, the ceiling is the roof for him. Yeah.
Well, and to think that, I mean, just even thinking that, and there's been no talk yet because we're not to that point yet of who might be taking red shirts. But like the fact that, Antoine West could be a red shirt, and you're sitting here 10 minutes ago saying he's going to be a baller. He's just going to be an absolute baller. And to think that he might be one of the guys that they consider redshirting.
Yeah.
That to me is an amazing concept because you can see how good this kid's going to be, and you're just like, you got to wait. You got just wait. You can be with us this year, but you just got to wait to get on the court.
Yep. Yeah. It's going to be interesting to see what they decide, what they do with him. But he struggled early in that practice, and I think it was first practice jitters, but once he got into a rhythm, he was doing some really good things. So it just it's almost an embarrassment of riches that Purdue has. Like,
I am never embarrassed by it, Dustin. Ever.
Never embarrassed by the riches.
That's
there you
right.
go.
Well, Dustin Schutte from Sports Illustrated, thanks so much for coming in and kind of talking some FIBA, talking our Boilers that are playing overseas right now in Switzerland, and then also the recruiting trail. It's July finally. At least we've turned the calendar to yet another month, but we're still a few months away. So thanks for coming on and letting us know your thoughts on things so far.
Absolutely. It was a pleasure. I always enjoy talking with you guys.
Yeah. Grant, a fantastic conversation with a good dude that knows his Boiler basketball.
Oh yeah, I always love talking with Dustin because he knows a lot more than we do about some of those inner workings of pretty basketball. So looking forward to continuing to inch closer to that season and get things rolling.
All right. Well, thanks so much for joining us on this Wednesday episode of Boilermaker Lounge. For Grant Flora, I'm Sam Sprunger. We'll see you later.